Here we have a clip by MSNBC talking about the constitutional sheriffs movement, which is a group of sheriffs who believe the Constitution gives them basically unlimited power and ability to do whatever they want.
You remember Joe Arpaio, the Joe Arpaio, who's known for forcing inmates to wear pink underwear, for running an actual chain gang of minors in a juvenile detention center, and for yelling at detained undocumented people, quote, "There is nobody with more authority than me." Arpaio, the self-proclaimed constitutional sheriff, was later granted then-President Trump's very first presidential pardon for criminal contempt of court. In a very Western movie kind of way, Arpaio believed he was not just the law enforcement, but the law itself.
This is something not only like sheriffs believe, but a lot of cops and uh, deputies, chiefs, and stuff like that. They believe that they're basically God of the law and can do anything they want, especially when it comes to people being in their prison, because pretty much at the moment they can do whatever they want. Um, all they gotta do is fudge some documents and boom, they've gotten away.
There was no law enforcement higher than him, the elected sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona. Now, Arpaio was a prime example of what we now know to be so-called constitutional sheriffs. Those who follow this theory believe that the county sheriffs have the power and the duty to make their own determinations about which laws to enforce and how to enforce them. It's not just enforcing laws and following the Constitution. It also involves resisting laws and nullifying and refusing to enforce laws that a sheriff has somehow deemed unconstitutional themselves.
Though a lot of cops do have that kind of ability, they just consider it discretion in order, to keep the jails from filling up too much with, arresting people for minor things and stuff. Cops have the ability to decide if they want to take a person to jail or just like give them a ticket or a warning. Though the constitutional sheriff's movement takes that to a whole different level.
This week, Democratic Congressman Sean Casten of Illinois hosted a discussion panel with legal and constitutional experts from around the country. Here is his warning to the nation.
The constitutional sheriff's movement is one of the most scariest things in our democracy right now because it threatens the very existence of our democracy.
Sheriffs are generally elected by the public, and they are typically the highest county-level law enforcement officer. Their duties vary by region, but there are federal and state laws that supersede county-level authority. This should be obvious to anybody who attended the third grade.
If these sheriffs were actually like wanting to go against various oppressive laws, like laws against trans people, laws against the consumption of various drugs, and uh, other laws that are at the moment somewhat unconstitutional as they affect people's rights, I would be in support of them doing that. But these sheriffs are wanting to uh, go against various laws that support people's rights and just want to violate their rights and treat them like trash.
This group of so-called constitutional sheriffs believe that their scope and power stretch far and very wide. And here's why Congressman Casten is so spooked by the constitutional sheriffs movement. Last year, after a mass shooting in Highland Park, Illinois, left 7 people dead and 48 others wounded, the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, banned the sale and distribution of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in that state. Within a few days of the law's enactment, more than 90 of Illinois' 102 county sheriffs released statements saying they would not enforce the assault weapons ban. Many of the letters were nearly identical, by the way, provided to them by the Illinois Sheriff's Association.
Though, if the Illinois governor passed a law banning trans people from existing in Illinois, the sheriffs would be happy to uphold such a law, even to the point of beating trans people.
At a press conference days after the new gun restrictions were passed, Sheriff William Rutan from Crawford County, Illinois, said this.
I am a constitutional officer. I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States first and foremost, and that me and several of the other sheriffs in the state, like most of us, and several state's attorneys, along with the Crawford County State's Attorney.
I wonder what he feels about what is considered to be quote unquote anchor babies, people that are considered to be quote unquote undocumented, having children in the United States, and those children being considered Americans. Because I know a lot of right wingers want to have that removed to prevent people from becoming Americans just because they're born in the United States.
Have sent out these letters stating that we feel this law that has recently passed is unconstitutional, and how we do not want to, or how we are not going to enforce any of that law.
Now, in 2011.
Okay, so I mean, if they can just decide not to enforce this law, then they can decide not to enforce any law. So what makes them want to enforce one law over the other?
And two-term sheriff of Graham County, Arizona, Richard Mack, founded the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association of America, CSPOA. Sheriff Mack was also a member and board member.
Nothing in the Constitution says that you can't consume any, that there is nowhere in the Constitution where it says the consumption of drugs is illegal. So I'm curious if these constitutional sheriffs will be against drug laws, because I doubt it. Also, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that people from other nations cannot move into the United States. So I'm curious how they feel about immigration as well.
Of the Oath Keepers at the time, a far-right extremist group that we've now come to know. He says he left the group in 2014, but he's continued to appear publicly close with Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes, who, by the way, was just convicted of seditious conspiracy for his role in organizing January 6th. This is from CSPOA's website. Quote, the law enforcement powers held by the sheriff supersede those of any agent, officer, elected official, or employee from any level of government when in the jurisdiction of the county. The vertical separation of powers in the Constitution makes it clear that the powers of the sheriff even supersede the powers of the president.
Well, yeah, I knew they were gonna go down that route, claiming that they had greater powers than the president. That's funny, because I want to see them rally the military on their behalf, because I doubt that's going to happen. And the person that controls the military of the United States is the one in charge.
When the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre prompted a push for gun control measures in Congress, Sheriff Mack, the guy who runs that organization, of Arizona, compiled a list of nearly 500 sheriffs who he said had vowed to uphold and defend the Constitution against, quote, Obama's unconstitutional gun control measures. The theory is used most commonly by sheriffs across the country to resist gun control laws and to enforce harder lines on immigration, but also to resist tax laws, marriage equality, land management, and environmental policies.
Taxes. I wonder how much they worship the founding fathers, because George Washington sent in military troops to quell the Whiskey Rebellion, which was people protesting taxes on whiskey, because George Washington was like, those dollar bills are mine.
In 2021, sheriffs across the nation used the same logic to defy COVID-19 lockdowns and mask mandates. And last year, during the midtown election, CSPOA and other right-wing groups teamed up to station poll watchers at ballot drop boxes and voting centers. And they launched a direct hotline that was supposed to connect poll watchers directly to the sheriff's office. While just about 10% of the nation's 3,000 sheriffs are actually registered with the CSPOA, half of sheriffs nationwide who responded to a Marshall Project survey believe that their authority as county sheriff outranked that of federal or state government. Whether used to oppose mask mandates or gun restrictions, voting laws, or immigration policy, the so-called constitutional sheriff movement is an abuse of power. Ironically, there's no constitutional basis to back up the theory of the sheriff's supremacy, and there's also a sign of something bigger. It's a twisted interpretation of the Constitution in order to assume power and subvert the systems of our democracy. A sheriff is meant to be an impartial arbiter of the law. If a local sheriff has the ultimate constitutional authority over state and federal governments, then welcome to the Wild Wild West.
No, it's welcome to a police state. Well, yeah, true, Wild Wild West, since there was one cop that basically had control over everything. I guess besides maybe the richest person who had bought the town or whatever, but without the helping of the sheriff, uh, that person never really got anywhere.